Hey guys, I'm going to do something a little bit different here because I just recently watched something that I really wanted to talk about, and it didn't really fit with Rob Watches or regular movie vlogs, so I'm just going to kind of vlog it. I turned the camera toward the movies just to indicate that I am talking about a live action TV show. Well, not a TV show, a live action series, we'll say. It's called Stranger Things, and it's on Netflix, and I remember seeing commercials for it pop up online on YouTube as part of ads or whatever, and I thought to myself, that looks kind of cool. I might check that out at some point. And then a lot of people I knew were talking about it, so that got me motivated to check it out. And it's a very short series. It's only 8 episodes long, with each episode being a little bit under an hour. So you're looking at maybe a little over 7 hours of watching, possibly, give or take. I have not been this into a live action series in a very long time. And keep in mind, I've yet to see Game of Thrones. I've never even seen an episode of Game of Thrones yet. Also, there's like a lot of other shows that I've really been meaning to watch. I've never even watched Breaking Bad, and people say that show was great. And stuff like Doctor Who, I can probably count the number of episodes of Doctor Who I've seen on one hand, so there's a lot of it, forgive me, okay? There's so much Doctor Who. I would love to get into it, but I don't know where to start. But yeah, as you know, I'm all about the animation. I love cartoons and animated movies and TV shows. But I have not been into a live action series like this probably... God, when was the last one? Probably like the X-Files in the 90s, because I used to watch I loved the X-Files. I loved the X-Files in the 90s. I did watch the revival of it, but I thought it was alright, but I wasn't feeling it the same way I was with the original show. But when I watched Stranger Things, I immediately got hooked on it, and it could potentially be a bit of a bias, because this movie is kind of a love letter to 80s movies, and like the really good ones like Spielberg, or you know, they make references to stuff like the Goonies, E.T. There was one scene that spoke very much of it felt really Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Very, like I said, very Spielberg, except that Spielberg had nothing to do with it, which is very interesting. Yeah, I got a very like Stand By Me vibe from it too. There's a little bit of maybe Stephen King influence, possibly, you know, again, X-Files, because there's a big mystery about it. Maybe even a little bit of Lovecraft based on how the monster in the series looked. But let me back up for a minute and tell you what this show's about. So it's, like I said, it's a Netflix series. It's about this little like town. I'm gonna wait. I don't know if they ever mentioned where this town was, but I'm gonna wager a guess to say this is somewhere in the New England area of the U.S. Possibly, I'm gonna say possibly upstate New York, maybe Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or something like that, because they did mention NYU in an episode. So I'm assuming it's somewhere within that general vicinity, but it doesn't really matter. It could be anywhere. So there's this little town, and there's this like facility that I guess is on the outskirts of town, where they do all these crazy experiments, and there's these 4 kids for the most part we follow, and in the first episode, one of them is taking his bike home, and he disappears, and the people are searching for him, and at the same time, this mysterious girl shows up. This girl who was an experiment at that facility, she has no hair. Well, she's has a shaved head. She's very quiet. She's very timid. She has tattered clothes on, and she has these crazy psychic powers. She can levitate things. She can push things. And it's very. I hate to use this as an example, but it kind of reminded me of the anime Elfen Lied, whatever. Very loosely though. So there's this whole mystery of. They gotta find... I'm gonna try and avoid as many spoilers as possible, but I can't guarantee it. If you've watched up to this point and you're a little worried, you're not comfortable watching this video without watching the series, you could stop right here, but definitely check it out. It's a very great show. But again, I'll try to avoid spoilers as much as I can. So they lose this kid. Nobody knows where he is, and all these weird, mysterious things keep happening around town. Other people disappear. There's this monster that's lurking in the woods. This girl shows up with psychic powers, and the other three kids, they make friends with her and they hide her in one of their basements. I gotta say, can we pause for a moment and really appreciate how great the children actors are in this? Because with that is one thing that the 80s really got right, was the child actors. You watch like Explorers or Goonies or any movies that had kids in it, and they were all so good. E.T. was another one, again, Stand By Me. A lot of the movies that were clearly inspirations for this show. But they were also, I don't know what it was, but they all felt so natural and believable, and they were so good that many of them still have careers to this day, which is a testament to how great they were. I don't know what happened, but like probably sometime in like the late 90s, maybe 2000s ish, is when child actors kind of, I don't know, they became very hit or miss, because sometimes you'll get a Haley Joel Osment, sometimes you'll get a Jake Lloyd, and it's a huge gamble. And I don't want to disrespect Jake Lloyd. That guy has been through enough, so he doesn't need me messing with it. But anyway, all the kids in this movie were so good. Particularly, I want to highlight the girl who played Eleven, who was really good, and also I wish I remember his name. He was kind of the fat kid trope of the group of kids. Every kid had what would be called the fat. He's not fat, he was not very fat, but he spoke with a lisp, and he had this baseball cap, and he was always eating. And in one episode, he went searching through the school for. They were looking for the stash of pudding, and he wanted to eat some. But he was really good, because he had that sort of comedic performance to him, but at the same time he felt very genuine, because there was a lot of very human moments with him. Like there's a scene where the other two boys fight, and he wants to be the one to help bring them back together, and he had this he was very sincere about it. He was really good. Also, there were some other kids in this movie, and they brought back something that I both love, because it's such a great thing to have, but it's also so cringeworthy, and that's 80s bullies. 80s bullies. The kind of kids that were dicks for the sake of being dicks. And oh god, were they dicks. It got to the point where one of them pulled a knife on one of the other kids, and it's like, oh yeah, you're a total psychopath. There's also I want to also address the fact that there were a lot of really great performances in this show. Winona Ryder plays the mom of the boy who was lost, and she did a really good job. She kind of made the character, like, she was kind of spiraling through insanity, and part of the mystery of the show is that where the kid ends up, she can communicate with him, or like he can communicate with everybody, but they're not sure where he is. And again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but there's this whole scene where, like, she believes, like, everyone thinks he's dead, but she believes, and they just think she's crazy, and she's trying to communicate with him, and it's so very well done. And there's also a lot of, like, great side characters in this movie, where again, this movie did like everything right that the 80s did, because it had the right tone, the lighting, the creepiness, the adult situations. They had the group of kids that were it's so good. It had a lot of great side characters too, and many of them we didn't really see a whole lot of, but we got to know them very well in their short time. Particularly, like, a good example of this is the first person to find the girl Eleven, who you know, she sneaks into a diner and it's owned by this guy, and you know, he thinks she sneaks into the kitchen to steal some food, and he chases her down thinking she's a thief, but then he like sees her and sees that she's like dirty and she's wearing tattered clothing, and then for the next couple of scenes they're together. You get a real feel for the kind of person he was. Too bad he wasn't around for very long, but spoilers. There was also this side plot where the brother of the boy who disappeared was trying to look for him. He was trying to go through the woods and see if he could find anything, and he was following a girl who was the sister of one of the other boys, who was dating this other guy who surprisingly had an arc through this series. I did not expect this, because they get together and you think he seems like an okay guy. He's kind of a typical, like, I'm bored with school, I'm a jock, whatever, but he had this like genuine I want to help you study kind of thing, and then it kind of escalates to like I want to get you in bed, and then she leaves him, and then he sees them the brother and her together, and they go on like, oh man, it's I have to collect my thoughts. Hang on a second. He sees them together, and then his friends try to like slut shame her, and then he gets into a fight with them, and then he gets the brother gets arrested, but he just ends up with this like bloody like you know, injury on his face, and he kind of has this thing where it's like, maybe I was a jerk. Maybe I shouldn't be hanging out with all these other people, because he had friends with him, and they were all kind of going with the whole slut shaming thing. They were spray painting like she's a slut all over town. So after that, he goes to, you know, the place where he spray painted, and he's like, hey, can I help you clean that off? And then he helps them clean it off. And then he shows up later in the movie, and this is kind of spoilers, but surprisingly, they are alluding to the fact that her and the kid's brother are going to get together. And honestly, I would have loved to have seen that, but then they kind of throw you a curveball where like there's a lot of forgiveness, and she ends up back with him, who has changed. And I was like, wow, that was quite a quite misleading. I would never have expected that to happen. It's a shame. I would have loved to have seen them get together, but he kind of forgave him, and early in the movie he had a camera and he smashed it, and he was like, at the end of the movie he bought him a new one, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice though, you know. Let's see. I love how the kids in this movie were total nerds. And I don't mean like they played Dungeons and Dragons and they did all that, but they weren't just geeks, they were nerds. They were like intelligent kids, because they were friends with their science teacher, and the science teacher got this like long range radio, and they were like so excited to play around with it, which becomes a plot point later on. And I like how they use their brains in a lot of situations. It's very important. I love it when we don't have idiots for protagonists, you know? So much of that is happening nowadays. But yeah, it was really cool. I love that they were smart kids. I love that they you know, I like that. I guess this movie did take place in the 80s, because there was a lot of 80s music. There was a lot of movie posters in the background. There was like The Thing and Evil Dead and a bunch of other ones. There's a scene where when everybody left the house, Eleven came out of the basement. She was walking around the house, checking everything out. She turned the TV on, and they were playing He-Man. And honestly, all I could think of was, because this was a scene where the kids were at school, the parents were at work. This was the middle of the day, and honestly, all I could think of is, why are they playing He-Man in the middle of the day? Nobody's watching that. That belongs on Saturday mornings, goddammit. Oh, man. So, yeah, I have very few bad things to say about this show, actually. I'm not used to saying that. The only thing I can think of maybe that was a little bit disappointing was perhaps the design of the monster, because like what happened was they were using this girl for like psychic experiments. They wanted to use her to like spy on Russians because it was the 80s, and you know, gotta watch out for them Ruskies, you know. So they wanted to use her powers to spy on Russians, but during one of her sessions, apparently she tapped into something else, and they believe they made contact with some parallel universe, and they wanted to use her to make contact with that universe. Their focus had shifted, so they told her to make contact with this creature, and it tore a hole into our dimension, and the creature got out and was killing people, which was sad because there was one character in this show that kind of got hit pretty hard, and it was the friend of the girl who was the sister of one of the boys. She was a very, very untimely victim of this thing. But anyway, this thing comes through a portal, which is this like gooey, like fleshy looking tear that appears in like walls. There was one that was in a tree, and it comes into our world to hunt, and it takes people back to its world, and that's where the boy ended up. But again, I won't spoil it any further. But the way this creature looked, I don't know what I was expecting, but I felt like I was expecting something a little bit more, because it was basically this tall, like scaly looking bipedal thing with like long arms, and instead of a head it had like a mouth, which was like 3 like flaps. There was one down here and one here like this. It was all mouth. Its head was all mouth, and it was pretty cool looking. Sorry, I got interrupted. I had to cut away for a second. So the monster just looked like something you'd see in like Silent Hill or Resident Evil. Resident Evil seems to be more appropriate. But it wasn't horrible. This is just me nitpicking, but it's really the only negative thing I have to say about this show. I loved everything else about it. I don't know if they're gonna do any more. I don't know if it's gonna be continued or what, but it seemed to have wrapped up fairly nicely. There is a little bit of a twist ending at the end of it, but it felt more foreboding rather than any kind of like sequel bait. But I don't know. I'm okay with it as it is. I mean, maybe I'll have to look up like the people who wrote this. I got to see if they're gonna work on anything else. I definitely want to check it out. So let's see. Is there anything else I got to say about this show before I get interrupted again? No, I think I've said about everything else. Anything else I could possibly say would probably go into spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that. So, all right, you know what? I think I've said everything I needed to say about it right now. But yeah, Stranger Things was really good, and if you've not checked it out yet, definitely check it out. So, I don't know how to end this. I don't usually do vlogs like this, so all right, I gotta go work on some other stuff. So check out Stranger Things. It's only 8 episodes, little under 8 hours of watching. I marathoned it. Unfortunately, I was up until about 3 a.m. watching this show. I was telling myself I'm gonna stop watching halfway through and watch the rest tomorrow, but I got so into it that I just kept going all the way through, which was bad because that was a work night and I had to go to work the next day. But yeah, Strange Days, great series. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video.